Hi, welcome back to Unfiltered Unspoken. And as you know, we're going to continue to bring life experiences of all different kind. Today we have Diana Alt, and she's going to share her life experiences from grieving and work abuse, and her career. So I'm going to bring up Diana. Diana, welcome to Unfiltered Unspoken. It is an honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Dimitri and Sid. It is great to meet both of you. So I guess I feel a little awkward here. This is a little different way to do this. So to give everybody a little perspective, basically, Dimitri, you nailed it. I had a whole lot of stuff happen all at once. So in 2009, my husband that I'd only been married to for 2.5 years, and he was a good one, died suddenly of a brain tumor. So he had just been diagnosed and he ended up having a seizure. So my life got upended then. 8 months later, my dad died. And my dad and I were besties. We got along so well and had a lot in common. And then on top of all of that, right before my husband had died, he and I both had really, really toxic work situations that we had to deal with. And I've honestly had to deal with a couple of those through my life. So, did a 20-year career in IT roles. So I worked mostly for software development products companies in tech. And I did all kinds of roles like project management and product management. And I got really, really in tune with how people were treated on the job. So how they got treated whenever you were trying to, deliver on a project, how you got treated by your boss, were you treated like a valuable person or just like somebody that should fear them and just do whatever they had to say. And before my husband died, he and I both had really bad jobs. He had just accepted a job right before he got sick that he was really excited about. And I had just left a really toxic job. And I pivoted and turned that over time into a full-time business as a career and executive coach, which is what I do now. So I take my trauma and I try to understand other people's trauma, and I try to help them through and help them get out of bad work situations, because I'm a big believer that if work doesn't feel good, the rest of your life is not going to feel good. So is that what you're looking for, Demetria, to kick us off?
You muted, but
Yeah,
yes.
yes, ma'am. You hit it on the
Okay,
nail.
all right,
Okay.
all right. Good deal, good deal.
All right. So, starting at the kind of beginning of your synopsis here, you and your husband were married for 2.5 years. How long were you together
About
totally?
5.5. We were together about 5.5 years, and and we were friends for a couple years before that. I actually met him at work. I live in the Kansas City area. I grew up outside St. Louis,
Mm-hmm.
went to college in mid-Missouri, and then in 2002, I moved to Kansas City to take a job, and I actually met him at work, and we were good friends for a couple years. Then he transferred departments and dropped on me, oh, by the way, I've liked you for 2 years, so we should get together. So kind of the rest was history. We got married in 2000. We got together in 2004, got engaged in 2006, got married in 2007.
That's
So
wonderful. That's wonderful.
yeah.
And now when discovering I guess his sickness per se, did it happen, just in daily kind of routine checks, or like did he get sick some way somehow and you guys found out?
Yeah, so let me tell you about that. So he had a brain tumor that was like not common to have in adults. That's kind of fast forwarding a little bit, but he had a kind of brain tumor that is commonly found in children under the age of 5, if you can believe that. And the reason that we found out that he even had this is he was having some issues with like headaches and balance. And he thought it was like he had to take blood pressure meds. A lot of people are on blood pressure meds, and he had just changed some of his meds around. So he just thought it was that adjustment period to his new medications. And then one day he fell at work and like clocked himself in the head, and then got over that. And then a couple weeks later, we basically had to take him to the hospital with blinding headaches. And shortly after that, found out that he had some kind of something on his brain near his cerebellum. They couldn't quite figure out what it was, tried to get swelling to go down, and they ended up having to do a craniotomy, which is a surgery where they like literally take a piece of your skull out so they can take, basically biopsy a part of your brain that doesn't look right. And then we found out he had cancer. So he also had a history of lymphoma when he was young. So before I ever met him, he had lymphoma as a teenager. So he had been through the cancer rodeo for a different kind 2 times. But actually, he never ended up starting any treatment. We were trying to figure out what all that was going to look like. And he had some recovery from surgery before we could start doing any radiation or chemo. And he just one day had a seizure and was gone like that.
Wow. So you said it's called lymphoma?
Well, he had lymphoma.
Mm.
He had lymphoma when he was a teenager.
Mhm.
Hodgkin's disease. A lot of people have heard of Hodgkin's disease. So he had that when he was 14 and he had it when he was 19. And then he was 40 whenever he got the brain tumor that he got, which is called medulloblastoma. And I've never heard of anybody, like, I don't know anybody since that's had that. I had never heard of it before he got sick. I've never met anyone since then that has had it. Although, we have the Google, we can go and figure out things on the internet. We know other people have it, but it actually took them kind of a long time to figure out what sort of brain tumor he had, since they thought it was since that kind is usually found in children. They look at it and they're like, that can't be right. So they send it to another doctor and they're like, yep, that's right. So that was the experience there.
Did they give an explanation of how that could have occurred from a child's brain injury?
Yeah, they have it's weird, like, because there's certain things that are more and less common, but does anybody ever really have an explanation for that? No. Does it actually matter? Probably not. There were some people that were speculating that maybe because of radiation he had and treatments he had when he was younger, that maybe that made him end up developing this brain tumor when he was 40. There's not really any way to know that, whether that happened or not. We did find out, though, because the type of brain tumor he had is one that is treated primarily with radiation. Well, you can only have like a lifetime radiation dose. So if you had radiation when you were a kid, they have to look at all that and figure out how much can we give you now before we cook your insides. And it turned out that he was really lucky, because when he had his first bout of cancer in like the early to mid 80s, they actually used as little radiation as possible. And that was not normal. It was like innovative at that time. So the way that they treated him when he was 14 actually made it more possible to treat him at 40. So if he had not had that seizure, he might have had better chances than somebody else with different doctors earlier in their life. So it's crazy stuff. So
yeah, definitely, I can't really explain medical marvels, but I guess around that time, were you all close with your families? Did you have a support system around the time of when he got sick? What was that time like for you?
It was a very weird time, because the entire period from when we really figured out, wow, this is really wrong, to the day that he died was like 6 weeks or something like that. So we knew, because we still were on the like, is this medicines? Like, what is this happening? Until the day that he just had a blinding headache. We had to go to the ER. At first they thought, oh my gosh, maybe he's dehydrated. So they hydrated him and sent him back home. And we had to go back again the very next day with the same thing. And at that point they were like, we need to take some pictures and figure out what's going on there. And that's when they started seeing bad stuff on CTs and so forth and so on. So it was a short period of time that felt like the longest period of time of my life. I don't know how people that, have a spouse or a family member that has cancer for, several years, they're degrading. I don't know how they do it, because 6 weeks was hard enough. It was very difficult. As far as support was concerned, my husband had a lot of family in Kansas City. My family was mostly in Indianapolis and in outside the St. Louis area. And so at that point, like I had emotional support from my parents, you know, but I didn't have them coming up to help me with a lot of things. I did have some friends and some family that were local in Kansas City helping me. One thing that was really kind of difficult at the time is I had just started a job, a brand new job 6 weeks before he ended up going in the hospital, and he never came home after he had that second time we had to take him to the ER. He never came home again because they were trying to figure out what was what, and then he had to have surgery, and then he had to go to rehab, you know, this kind of stuff. So that was 5-6 weeks that he was in the hospital. I had a new job, so I didn't have any PTO, I didn't have any FMLA, but they were kind enough to let me work remotely before it was cool, because in 2009 most people were not regularly working remotely. So I basically told my boss I'd put in a day of work as much as I could. It just might take 16 hours to do it. So my work was very good, but if this had all happened 2 months earlier, I would have been at a job that was downright abusive. So I might have had FMLA and things like that to leverage, but the environment was so negative that even having the time off and having, you know, those benefits would not have been better than what I dealt with a brand new job. So
Wow, I'm sorry. I mean, it's good that you had a supportive job at the
yeah,
time, because it was the same when my mom had a stroke. So it's a blessing in disguise. But
yeah.
can you share with the audience some of the changes that you went through from a normal relationship to the new changes from your husband getting sick?
You mean like from the normal relationship to the caregiver
I mean, yeah, to
relationship?
the
Is that what
caregiver.
you're?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That is a really different thing, and that's another interesting topic. I'm glad that you brought that up, because there is a difference between a life partner and a person that you're a caregiver for. In my case, I've actually talked to a lot of people that have been through this kind of thing, including a friend of mine whose husband died of a different kind of brain tumor just about a month and a half or 2 months ago. My husband, the whole time he was dealing with this, was very lucid. You know, yes, he was having headaches. Yes, he had to have brain surgery, but anytime he was awake, you know, wasn't in surgery or recovery, he was very much with it. So, from an intellectual perspective, basically, we were partners through the whole thing. I believe, I am a big believer that people should have agency until they cannot have agency. So whenever we were going through this period, I didn't have caregiving at home to take care of or to deal with. That's something that is a big topic for a lot of people that have long-time cancer in their family. In our case, I still felt mostly like a partner that had the added responsibility of, number one, bulldogging the doctors for information to make sure we were getting the latest info on what we needed to do. And number two, there was a factor that's not super comfortable of having to gauge when he needed rest and when he needed visitors. So there was a time where I had to tell, like, even his parents, like, he's just tired. Like, today is not the day to come and try to see him, and try to stagger things out so that he can get some rest and have some peace and quiet. Because a hospital is the least peaceful place you can possibly be. So that was what it was like for me. As far as taking care of home and everything like that, whenever this was going on, it was not too bad for me. Had a fairly small house, you know, had some couple of people that volunteered to do stuff like mow the lawn, because I'm not going to do that anyway. I don't like mowing the lawn. And so it was a lot of takeout and trying to get a load of laundry done here and there, and the rest of it can wait. I'm not necessarily a neat freak. So we did not have kids, so I wasn't trying to chase after little ones and explain what was going on with daddy or anything like that. So it was mostly managing, um, just trying to keep work going and trying to keep information going and trying to keep, um, trying to basically keep each other sane. So there was a little of that going both ways.
Absolutely. And I do want to get into the workplace trauma you suffered,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
I do want to just because I stress a lot of things, being as all my profession is an insurance agent. But with you guys being so or married so very little time, had you had arrangements kind of set up, in regard to what bills might be, debts?
I love this question, Sid. I'm actually very, very glad that you asked this. So when my husband died, he was 40 and I was 36. I'm 48 now. I'm an old lady. But when I was very young, I watched my parents model pretty good financial responsibility. They didn't talk a ton about what they did, but my parents were not predisposed to debt. It's hard to get all the way out of college with a master's degree. Especially I had been laid off a couple times very early in my career due to recessions and things like that. So I won't say that I never had any debt, but I always had a bias for trying to make sure that I had savings, for making sure that I paid off debt quickly, and making sure that I had appropriate insurance. So a lot of young widows don't have that. They haven't thought it through. When we're in our 30s, we still think we're immortal. And so in my case, we knew, well, on the bills side, we both made good money. So we had disposable income, and we had been paying down some student loan and credit card debts before he died. We also knew that life insurance was important, especially because his prior cancer history was going to potentially make it difficult for him to get independent life insurance. So we always made sure that he had good amount of extra life insurance from his company. And one of the most important things that we did, when we figured out he was sick, when we had gotten this cancer diagnosis, he had given notice at a job right around the same time he ended up in the hospital. So I had to make sure that I had all the information from his employer to extend his life insurance benefits, which were substantial. It was 2.5 or 3 times, like it was 3 times his annual income or something like that. It was a lot of money. It was pay off the house, pay off everything, and still have some leftover kind of money. And he had his right arm injured during his surgery. So we literally had to have a notary come to the physical rehab hospital and notarize that he marked an X with his floppy arm that didn't work on the paperwork to extend his life insurance. We did that about 4 days before he died. And if we had not taken care of that, I had some life insurance for my work, but I was brand new on that job, and I just got $50,000 or something like that. I didn't have like make life work correctly money. So we made sure that we extended his. And we had decided even before all this went down, because he had taken the job offer before he went into the hospital, of course. And we had decided, months before that, when he was starting to look for a job, that he was going to continue and extend that insurance from his employer, because he did not think he would be able to get any other life insurance. And that would be the way to make sure that he can build up life insurance that we would want for our family. Does that make sense, Sid?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Literally the most important thing that we did was make sure that we were on top of that. And we were very good at communicating about our finances all throughout our relationship, all throughout our marriage. So that is something that I'm very glad about, because it gave me options.
Mm-hmm.
The most important reason for that is to have options.
Right. I
Yeah,
try to tell people. I'm sorry, Dimitri.
Oh, no. Go ahead, Sid. Go ahead.
I try to tell people all the time. Why, even if you have a adequate amount of savings, or you feel like you'll get by, when that grief hits, it feels totally different. You might not know how it hits. You might not want to do anything. So to be behind on bills on top of that is it's not worth it. So if you are able to get something for yourself and you have your family set, do it, please.
Well, another thing, I'm sure, Sid, you've heard this advice. A lot of times people will say, don't do anything, don't make any big financial decisions until a year after your person dies. Like, put the money in savings. Just, if you have life insurance, put the money in savings and keep it going. And I actually did not do that. I paid off debts immediately. Basically, we had a plan and I executed it. So, and at the time, like, we were loosely following Dave Ramsey baby steps because we wanted to pay off all the things, we wanted to be having as many options in general. And so it really was a situation where we had so well understood what we wanted to do, and we understood what life insurance resources and savings and all this kind of stuff we had. So I basically went from like step 2 to step 7 on Dave Ramsey baby steps whenever the life insurance checks came in. So I didn't feel the need to wait because I knew what my plan was before I even needed it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's good y'all had an execution plan because a lot of folks don't, and we're glad you're able to share this so people can see.
Yeah, and I managed most of the money. Like, I actually weirdly enjoy paying bills. Some people hate it, but I had periods, like, I came out of college right before the tech wreck of like 2000, 2001. And I had 2 layoffs very early in my career when I didn't have a lot of resources. So I remember wondering how I was going to make rent, how I was going to pay the health insurance. I'm very fortunate. My family was always really supportive. They would have lent me some money if I would have ever needed it. But I went through that, and I actually have always ever since then enjoyed paying my bills, because anytime you got enough money in the bank to pay the bills is a good day. So.
Absolutely. And we'll kind of segue into the workplace abuse, because granted, I know the switch happened before, one of the hardest points of your life, but what were some of the things going on at work? Because if anything, if nobody's going through, abuse and other traumas that we talk about, we have mostly all experienced workplace abuse, and some don't recognize it as real trauma. You know what I mean?
They don't. And it's really interesting because so much of what everybody wants it to be big T trauma. A lot of times I don't know if you've talked about it on this podcast, but a lot of my friends that are in the therapy and psychology space talk about the big T trauma and the little T trauma. Well, the big T trauma, lose my husband, and then 8 months later lose my dad to his 3rd heart attack. He had health issues for years, so it wasn't super unexpected, but it still sucked. Because it's the 2 most important men in my life within 8 months were gone. But the little T trauma, and some of it I think maybe was, I don't know, maybe not big T, but maybe it's in the 14-point font instead of the 11-point font, if that makes sense. I've had a couple of situations in my career where there was work problems. For my husband, before he died, he was working as a software developer. He was a very good software developer. He had worked in tech for many years. And he was in an organization that just was led by a bunch of people that didn't listen to or value their technologists. So all they cared about was sucking up to the C-suite, sucking up to the executives. And they would build basically, project plans and expectations and deadlines that had no basis in reality. And then would not listen to either my husband or the other people working there about, no, this is not the way to do it. We're going to mess things up. We're going to cause problems for our clients, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it just got demoralizing. And he had the opportunity right before he died. He had interviewed and accepted an offer at a nonprofit in the Kansas City area, where at least 2, if not 3 of his good friends that he had worked with at a prior job for several years were all working. They were all happy. They had all switched from very demanding jobs to ones that let them see their wives and their kids and stuff more. So he was really excited about that. And honestly, they held his job for a while, because I had to call and tell them, look, Andy's in the hospital. He was supposed to start his job on whatever day. I don't know when he's going to be out. I'll keep in touch with you on what's going on. And they were willing to hold his job for I think they held it for 4 or 6 weeks before he died, because he was supposed to basically start that job right after he went into the hospital. So his new job treated him better when he'd never even started than his old job did. For me, I was working in an environment where from the day one of this job, it was kind of a mess. So I had interviewed to be a business analyst and QA software QA testing manager at a company that did business process outsourcing for several federal programs. And I was really excited. I had met the leaders of one program. I really liked them. I liked what the program was about. I literally showed up on the first day and they told me, that job's no longer available. We're putting you on this other team. So I got put onto this team. To their credit, they lost funding at the last second. So the funding that was going to be used to hire me for the first position suddenly disappeared. And to their credit, they could have rescinded the job offer and said, sorry, Charlie, peace out, good luck. Instead, they moved me to another program that had room in the budget and offered me that job. I never got to talk to anybody on that team before I made the decision, because it literally was Monday morning. I showed up and here you're on a different team. And there were, in particular, 2 women that had worked at the company for 10 years, and they had just gotten their first supervisor promotions not long before I started. And they resented the fact that someone came in from the outside and suddenly had a manager job. Well, I was a manager at my last job. There was these 2 women just like valued seniority over actual experience and results. And so that started us off on the wrong foot. And I ended up having to deal with them obstructing projects, backbiting me, all this stuff for a long, long time. I was there for 3 years. I worked way too many hours, and I had a very hard time getting anyone to listen to me there. And I'm pretty direct. Now, I didn't have the financial flexibility when I started that job that I do today, but it was really nerve-wracking because I'm stubborn. I'm like, I know I'm good at my job. I know I can help this team. I stuck it out probably longer than I should have. But, I had my team grow. I went from having 2 or 3 direct reports to having 11 direct reports at one time. And then these people that were trying to obstruct me, these old timers that were trying to obstruct my work and were so gossipy and all this stuff, they literally started blaming me for things that were their team's problems. And there was enough long timers that didn't know me, but knew these other employees that it just became hazing. It became hazing. So I was working 55 plus hours a week a lot of the time. I was getting hazed. And there's a tendency in the workplace, especially if women have a legitimate issue with other women, when they raise it to management, especially if management is men, but I've seen it happen with women too, that they treat it like it's just like 2 girls at the back of earth science class in 7th grade that are just like bickering at each other. They treat it like Mean Girls kind of stuff instead of treating it like what it was. And I was inside a hostile workplace. There's no question. I had several people that reported to me too that experienced some problems, but I was able to shelter from it. At one point, I actually got removed from my management position. They couldn't demote me and they couldn't and I didn't want it anyway. I wanted a different role, but they tried to make it about my performance instead of saying like, oh, this is like, you've been here 3 years. We don't want to do this anymore. Let's find you something else. They tried to turn it around and make it my fault. So I got removed from a management position. But HR would not let them formally demote me. They wouldn't let them cut my pay or anything like that because I'd had exceeds expectations on some performance reviews. So basically, at that point, I was like, I'm done. And I did the bare minimum for my job and I got the hell out. I went and found something else. And as soon as I left, these people that had been bullying me started bullying the people that reported to me. So it was really very terrible. And it was very hard because my situation, having 10 plus people report to me, I had more visibility than my husband did as a software engineer in his job, but we brought that home and we worked in the same industry. So it's already hard if you work in the same industry as your spouse. It's sometimes because you just want to talk about what's happening at work and, you geek out. If you like your stuff, you can sometimes do a little bit more of it than you should. And we had that added dynamic of it sucked. So we were bringing home the suck. So yeah, that was all right on top of, just right before everything that happened with my husband.
And during during your time with your dad as well, you went through
Yeah.
working for Grieving with your dad. So was this the same job or was this a different job?
So the timeline was that terrible job I just described. I left that in August of 2029. Andy ended up in the hospital in September of 2029. Not 2029. I don't know what I'm trying to say. 2009. So just like 6 weeks later, he was in the hospital. 5 more weeks after that, he's dead. And then the new job that I had, I was still there whenever my husband died in July, or my dad died in July. Too many dead people. My dad died in July of 2010, and they were very supportive through it. So the company that I had joined was a tech startup. I was going to be a product manager. Really liked the people that I worked for, and it was at the time I joined the company, it was still owned by the founders. So it was headquartered in the Kansas City area. It was owned by the founders. The founders actually had been in New York on some sort of either business trip or vacation when my husband died. They flew back for the weekend to go to my husband's funeral. And probably 20 people from the office came to my husband's funeral, and I didn't know any of them. Like, because I was barely there. I just started. I only knew a few of them. And then when my husband died, or when my dad died 8 months later, they were very supportive. They got bought out by another company. I can't remember the exact time frame. Might have been like 1 or 2 months before my dad died. But over time there, it got to be difficult too, because in that scenario, the new company that had bought the startup I worked for didn't want to keep a lot of the people that were perceived as loyal to the original owners. So they started they weren't very nice to the people from Kansas City. They were based on the East Coast. They weren't very nice to some of the people from Kansas City. And I had decided, you know what, I have options because I made all those good financial decisions. And in 2012, I was going to leave and take a break because I had worked hardcore all the way through after my husband died, all the way through after my dad died, because work is what I had to do to feel productive. And I decided to take a break in 2012, and then I got laid off. It's like I didn't have to quit. I got severance. It was fantastic. I'm like, thank you. Like, don't like being here anymore. Don't like the big company. Thanks for the health insurance and the severance check. That's amazing. And during that time, I actually went to some networking groups that were part of like an outplacement package. And I was helping my friends in these networking groups, and I had helped other friends, in the years before this, with their resumes and how to think about job search and like what questions do you really need to ask to figure out if you're going to fit somewhere or if it's really going to be a good job for you. And that ended up being a catalyst into the work that I do full time now. So one of the wild things about work is that a job that's amazing now can, you're just like one leadership change or one recession away from that potentially not being good anymore. And so I've had multiple situations that were kind of dodgy. The last job I had in corporate, I was a product manager. I had too much work on my plate. To give perspective, it took them 2.5 people to replace me after I left. And I had been begging for help, and they were like, you should be able to do it all. And then there's 2.5 people that has to replace me. But I ended up leaving that job because I ethically couldn't do it anymore. And again, good financial decisions years before left me with options. One of the deal breakers for me is that I had reported to one of the executives some current concerns that there was discrimination and harassment on the basis of visa status and race happening. And I was lied to. The executive that I reported that to per our process did not report it up to HR. And I'm like, I can't be here with that. So between that and some gaslighting that me and other people on my team that were way overworked got, I ended up choosing to leave that job. So Anyhow, it's a lot. I've had several times, and I realized also though that like the universe whispers at you, and if you don't listen when it whispers at you, then it talks a little louder, and then if you don't listen when it talks louder, it starts yelling at you. And so basically, some of these things with I'm not getting any help, I'm getting gaslit about this idea that I'm not good enough because I can't do the work of three people, and then this executive pulling the crap that he pulled, that was the universe yelling at me. And that's the point where I decided, I'm out. I'm going to go. I've wanted to own my own business for a long time, so I'm going to go do that.
And I understand work abuse, so trust me.
Oh, I looked at your LinkedIn earlier. I was creeping on you, Demetria.
Why you
You
didn't
have
follow me?
I just did it like when I went to LinkedIn to get my link so you could put it on the stream here.
Uh-huh.
I was like, "Oh my gosh, you've seen all the things at your company because you've supported all these executives and C-suite and HR. You see all the gross stuff, don't you?"
I do, and I've been a part of it for 20 years. So I understand the challenges that you have been through, and especially being a female, Black female, it is definitely challenging in corporate America. And sometimes I tell people when I work for retail, I didn't experience as much work abuse.
I feel like there's different ways that every job has different ways it gets to you. And one of the things that I've built out over all the years that I've coached is I believe that there's 4 dimensions to a really good job. Some people say dream job, ideal job, good job, whatever you want to call it. One is the work itself. Like, do you actually like what you're doing? You know, is it challenging enough without being too far over your head that you're going to fail? Is it fun? Do you not have to spend too much time doing stuff that sucks? Like, we all have to do some stuff that sucks. Even me owning my own business, I have to do some stuff that sucks. But is it minimized? You ever hit that like state of flow where like, oh, I don't know where the day went. I was having so much fun doing what I was doing. So that's the right work. The second is the right leader, which is about both what's your relationship with your direct boss? Like, are they the right boss for you? And there's no one formula for it. Everybody likes to say, well, I don't want to work for a micromanager, but nobody can actually define what micromanagement means to them. For me, when I talk about the boss, it's all about, is it right for you? Because if you are brand new in a company or an industry, you might need a lot more support and help and questions answered from your boss than if you've been doing it for 10 years. And it can be personality based. And then the other part of leadership is like, is there good strategic direction? Like, if your company is going down the toilet because nobody has any vision, that's not good, even if everybody is nice. The third is environment, which is how your work and your life work together. So that job that I had taken right before my husband went in the hospital, they paid me well. I had good benefits. They mostly had people working in the office with desktops, but in my situation, they said, here's a laptop, check in with us once to twice a week, do what you've got to do, do your best to get stuff done. Let us know you need help. That is the type of environment that I needed at that time. For other people, it could be, can I take the amount of vacation I need or get to Johnny's soccer game or whatever that is? That's the environment. And then the last is culture, because culture is not pizza parties and it's not foosball tables. It's how your values are, the company values are in action and if they line up to yours. So for example, if someone says to me, especially a large company, if they say on their website, we value diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they've got 5,000 employees, but there are no programs for Black History Month. There's no employee resource groups for women or for women or other minorities, LGBTQ. That doesn't fit. If you're saying that, also it doesn't fit if you're saying we don't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation and there's no domestic partner benefits. Like none of that stuff doesn't go together. So those are the things that I tell people that they need to look for. And if when people come to me, they're usually coming to me as a career coach saying, either I hate my boss, like he's not a good boss, or they say I'm bored with what I'm doing. And I've never yet had a single person that didn't come to me Other than if they got laid off. I've had people get laid off and they really like their job. They just need help finding the next one. But I've never had someone that was going to voluntarily quit come to me that didn't have at least 3 of those things broken. So anyway, that's like what I, through my own fires and through working with people first for free and then a few clients here and there, a couple times, a couple of clients a year, I built out that model and I think it works really well. So it's actually what I take people through if they're trying to decide whether to take an offer. So
right.
How does it look on this? How does it look on that?
So actually, while we're on that topic, can you go into a little bit more of like the services you offer, or why someone may need a career coach, or how you can help?
Oh, I love this question. I love this question because a lot of people, nobody really wants to change jobs. Like they might not like where they're at, but no one loves a job search, right? I don't even love a job search. I've done quite a few of them and I help people with them every day. But reasons you might need a career coach, there's 2 main lanes that I have services in. The first one is what I call career design. And so that's sort of the what do you want to be when you grow up? You're in some sort of career, you are no longer finding it satisfying. Usually the people that are coming to me for that type of program, they're done with the work. Like I was a tech project manager for 10 years. I'm bored with that. I don't want to do it. I'm sick of tech. I want to do something different. Let's figure it out. So they're trying to figure out what they can do that's in line with their values, but also, bump it up against the practicality of what their transferable skills are, what their money requirements are, and the flexibility requirements are, and then what's actually out in the marketplace. So I work people through that process to try to go from I'm not sure to 1 or 2 job titles that'll meet their needs on a lot of different levels. The other lane of coaching that I do is related to actually planning and executing a job search. So I have things that are as simple as I'll just do a resume review for you. You know what you want to do, the kind of companies you want to apply for, but you're not getting interviews, you don't feel comfortable with how your resume looks. I'll review it for you. I'll give you advice on what to do so you can move forward. Because if you don't have a targeted resume that you feel confident in applying with, that's not good juju for you. So I have that all the way up through I might work with somebody for several months. I have several clients on my roster right now that have gotten laid off after being at jobs for over 10 years. And so they feel like the whole game is new. What do I do? How do I go about this? So we work on understanding what kind of role they should target. And then figuring out what is their plan of attack going to be to execute that job search. So usually it's figuring out the target, then figuring out what's most important for them in terms of getting the resume done, getting references from prior employers, and building up their network and starting to activate their network, and then starting to apply and interview for jobs. So some of it is cheerleading and encouragement. Some of it is asking the hard questions about what you really want, because a lot of people are afraid to say out loud what they really want. So they keep going after the same stuff that they don't like. And some of it is really actually just skills. I do a lot of mock interview, coaching with people. They might be good on everything else, but they feel like the minute they have to talk to a hiring manager, like their mouth and their brain don't work together. So those are a lot of the things that I do. Another lane that I work on, it's a little less prominent, but I'm hoping to do some more with it in the future, is basically performance coaching for executives. So people that are maybe they're looking to get a new job down the road, or maybe they are just trying to get promoted or do a really good job in an executive role or a leadership role that they have. So right now I have one client as an example. He's in management at a company. His company, the general manager of the US business unit, is going to be retiring within the next 12 months. And so I'm helping him to prepare himself to take over that, because he's already been told, you're the successor. There is no other candidate. If you don't want it, we have to go outside. There's nobody else internally that can do it. So I just met with him today and we were talking about delegation, because he's used to a much smaller team and he's going to have the whole business unit. And we've got to think about what do you need to do for delegation? Because you as a year one GM, you're not going to perform exact same way as the guy that's had that job for 25 years before he retires. So that's some of the stuff that I do. And I figure, like, one of the things I figure is, like, let's be aligned, because we all have to work. Why not do it in a way that doesn't suck? Like, you know, he's about to change his job around. We're talking right now, not just about how he can do well in that job, but how he can do well in that job and still do volunteer work and still be there for his wife and his kids the way that he wants to be there for them.
And you know, it's a beautiful thing that you allowed the well, not allowed, you didn't allow. So the work abuse has transformed into something beautiful where you can help folks now, you know, through the process. Also, do you help? Do you allow, like, if there's leadership, to let them know how to be a better leader in the executive teams?
So I have done less with that, but I'm starting to have people get more interested. And one of the things, like, I got contacted earlier this week by a woman that I just helped with job search coaching probably like 5 or 6 years ago. And she's now in management for an e-commerce tech firm. And so she said, hey, our women's ERG is looking at planning basically a leadership summit for the women at our company. And we're really interested in finding out, you know, you're on our short list of people to come do keynote speaking to talk about how to be a better leader and that kind of stuff. So I can definitely foresee, I have all kinds of things I want to do. My top challenge in my business is actually focusing. I'm sure y'all can appreciate that. You know, you have had dozens and dozens and dozens of episodes of this podcast and all kinds of things that are coming. And sometimes you just have to say not now to some things. So I've got 2 or 3 book ideas too. So I just started a blog on my website. I've got like 3 posts up, but there's going to be a lot more as the year progresses. So I basically just want that the real ethos of my business is that work should feel good. And that we need to stop falling for the BS. So I don't know if we swear on this podcast, but I have BS in my name.
You can say whatever you want. You could have put
all
bullshit.
Right.
It's okay.
All right.
This is unfiltered, unspoken.
Hey, you know what? Everybody has their line. I can tell a story with or without cursing. I've been on enough podcasts to learn how to do it.
We don't care.
All right, let's curse. Here's the deal. There's a lot of bullshit. A lot of bullshit that people believe. And one of the book ideas I have that literally I was just coming up with last night, I came up with 2 book ideas for something that I want to try to maybe even do by the end of the year. One of them is like, what is the bullshit we get told about our careers and what's the truth? So I'm a Gen Xer. I don't know how old you ladies are, but I'm 48. I'm a Gen Xer. I was raised that if work was supposed to be fun, they wouldn't call it work. So we weren't raised with any sort of idea that work really could be fulfilling the way that, like, Gen Z is all on top of purpose-filled work. Like, they get it. They get it in a way the old people don't get. So we hear things like that, or a lot of people believe work can't be good. And if you're okay, like, everybody has different degrees to which they need to love their work. Some people are like, it's a job, I can leave it. I go home and hug my kids. I don't need that much satisfaction out of work. I'm very career driven. So I need to like and be engaged in what I'm doing. And that can happen for people. And the more intentional you are, the more that can happen. But there's everything from this notion of, like, if work was supposed to be fun, they wouldn't call it work, to there's a lot of, like, victim ideas and mentalities around career changes or job searches because we don't have a good sense of what we can and cannot control. So as an example, a lot of people will hide behind, oh, well, the ATS kicked me out. I applied for the job, but the ATS kicked me out, and it's just the damn robots, and, you know, there's no people ever looking at my resume and all that kind of stuff. And that actually isn't how that stuff works, especially if you're working with state or federal governments, or you're working with anybody that contracts. It's literally a law like federal regulations and laws dictate that someone has to review your resume with their eyeballs if you apply in certain situations that involve government jobs. And ATS systems mostly are just a filing cabinet. I've talked to like probably close to 100 recruiters about this. I've never been a recruiter. I've been a hiring manager, but I've never been a recruiter. And so people like use these things as excuses to give up. Or they never think, what could I do to improve this? Like, is there anything I can do to influence this situation? I'm applying all these places and I don't get any interviews. They'll just go back and say it's the robots instead of saying, gosh, I wonder if there's something I can do different. So I think there's a lot of different things that can be done. And then another myth is that if you switch like domains or industries, you have to start all over like you're a 22-year-old that just graduated from college, even if you have 20 years of experience. There are switches that are that way. If I were to leave tech and coaching and like go to nursing school or go back to be a teacher, I'm going to start on the year one salary of the school district's pay, but that's not the case for a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of opportunity to just go across like, oh, I did this and I'm going to go do this. And maybe I go back a little, but I don't have to bust all the way back to the beginning. So that's a lot of the stuff I like to call out. And I did not realize for a long time, ladies, that I actually was in a bullying environment. I think that happens a lot. I knew it didn't feel good, but I don't know that a lot of those scenarios I described to you, I don't think it was until I was in that last job where the executive ignored the report of harassment and discrimination that I was like, that's not right. That's toxic. That's actually illegal. I wonder what else has been messed up. And as I started spending a lot more time with therapy and with learning more about toxic workplaces and those types of things, I recognized kind of retroactively that some of what I just attributed to as this is not right for me actually was truly toxic behavior, truly bullying behavior.
Yeah, and I'm gonna let Sid. I'm gonna comment, but Sid has a question after. I think just being in corporate, my last 20 years, I've been in toxic or a bullying situation from somebody, but the company has loved me, but it just has been somebody. I mean, even my first big corporate America job, I can remember just being a single black mom, and that's how I was judged. And I did have two white males that used to push me against the file cabinet, and I dealt with it for a year till one day I stuck my elbow out, and when he tried it, I like elbowed him in his rib. So it had to get to that point, but it stopped. But I would go in the bathroom and cry. I reported it to my boss. But I went through it almost every day.
I have for me, it manifested differently. Mm-hmm. So I never had anything physical. I'm very lucky in that. So you're hot. You're a good looking woman. So I can understand. Maybe you too. You're a very beautiful woman. Maybe you two had a little bit more of like the physical or sexual harassment aspect. I had more of the bullying, and I feel like a lot of it was mostly by people that were threatened by me.
Me too.
Like they found my competence threatening in some way. And a lot of times, like all of my worst bosses that bullied or were the worst leaders for me, every damn one of them was a woman, except for the guy at the end. Every single one of them, because we women are not yet good at handling our junior high school tendencies where we feel a little insecure because someone, really good joined the team and we don't know how to deal with that. We don't know how to partner with them instead of fighting with them. And also my experience with, even when I've had conflict with men in the workplace, most of the time we processed it faster than a lot of the conflicts I've had with women in the workplace. So that's my experience. But I also bring a lot of masculine energy. So I think, your mileage may vary depending. I bring a lot of masculine energy, which means men like me. I've actually, I had debated at one point completely focusing my entire coaching practice on working with male executives.
And see, I've experienced. I've been in companies like I have been a favorite. Every company people love me. They love me. But I have folks that are intimidated because supporting the executive team, you have to be able to say no. You have to be like,
Yes.
certain things, you have to be the representation of the executive team. So I have always been a strong, like dominant female.
Yeah.
But you have folks that will test you. Because I had a lady before I had left. She literally, when I had put my notice in and she knew I was quitting, she was trying to get HR to create a position for her, one of my positions. So yeah,
Oh my
it's a lot. Yeah, yeah, it's another situation, but yeah. So I understand.
It's always something, and that's why it's really like it's really hard to say. You know, one of the most impactful things that I've ever had told to me about trauma was by a friend of mine who is actually in graduate school at Harvard University studying psychology and neuroscience. She was trafficked when she was younger. She might be a good guest whenever you work through the like 100 guests you already have on your list, but she is really interested in the relationship between trauma and physiology and also identity, like psychological identity. And she said, you know, one of the things people need to understand is that we all have traumatic experiences, but that doesn't mean that we all suffer trauma. And two people that have the same traumatic experience don't react the same way. One might have after effects and the other person might be able to process it and move on. It just depends on the person and other things that have happened to them. And that was really useful to me because I felt like if other people are dealing with X, you know, Mary seems fine, so I should be fine. Well, for number one, we don't know if Mary's fine because strong women and strong men, both of us, real good at hiding whenever we're suffering or masking it from ourselves. And number two, something that might trigger trauma in me might not trigger trauma in Mary or Joe. That's just how it is, but it could be flip-flop the other way around. So I have, I think I mentioned earlier, I've got a girlfriend whose husband died of a brain tumor about 2 months ago. He was sick. He had a glioblastoma, which is the same kind of tumor John McCain had. It's like the pancreatic cancer of tumors. Like you're screwed, especially if they find this when it's, you know, at stage 4. It's very, very unlikely that you'll be cured of that. And she has always been very proactive with her mental health. She's got very strong Christian faith, and she's studied philosophy, especially Stoic philosophy, for many years. And so a lot of the grief had already been processed because she was talking about it with her husband all along the way while he was sick because they knew what the prognosis was for him. So now she's making decisions for her and her 2 kids, and her family is like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. You should be grieving more. You should be like telling her how to grieve. And she's like, this sucks. Like, I didn't sign up to be widowed at 32, but like, I'm doing better than you're giving me credit for. So, doing way better than you're giving me credit for.
So I'm going to take my last question opportunity
Sure.
to ask you a personal to me anyway.
Yeah.
Now, with all the people that you work with, I do see just kind of when you're talking about resumes and how to go into certain things to get the results that you want. It's a lot about focus. It's a lot about narrowing things down and being intentional with what you're sending out. Now, in that regard, have you worked with many people that have ADHD? And what do you suggest for them?
Good question, Sid. That's a good question.
There's a difference between, I have had a couple of clients with ADHD. And honestly, I'm about at the point where I want to go and see if I can find some sort of supplemental coaching course on how to handle that better, because there's a lot of people that there's ADHD, and then there's like, oh my gosh, ADHD, I don't know how to deal with you level of ADHD. And so I have had 2 clients that are a little bit farther along on that difficult ADHD spectrum. I don't feel super equipped to serve them at the same level I do the people that have either low grade or no ADHD, but I'll tell you this. There's a difference in my experience between the type of focus to pick something and the type of focus to actually like do the tasks that you need to do to apply for your jobs, follow up, like call the people in your network or whatever. And I'm not an ADHD expert, but what I have figured out is that most people I work with only have a problem with one of them. If they say they have ADHD, they only have a problem with one of them. I've had one client that's had a problem with both of them. And so I've actually given her a lot of extra time and attention because I think we both did not realize how tough this was going to be for her. Plus, she's a bit older. But people can know what they want. I think when we think of ADHD, I think we think nobody can focus on anything, and that is not how I've seen that present to my clients or my friends with ADHD. So Sid, for you, do you feel like there's one type of like certain types of focus that are easier or harder for you?
Not necessarily. It's more so like I do have issues with finding the motivation. Like I'll know all day what I gotta do and
and you just don't do it. Yeah.
I can't just muster up the strength just to get it done.
Yeah.
Also when I like look for jobs, because I'm actually like doing this right now.
Oh, okay. Great.
It's literally to the point where like my search just literally, as long as it says remote, I don't care what it is. Like I'm just like, that is how general my search is. Yeah. So like I never like at my tender age of 33, I've probably been through more careers than most, like in real careers. So yeah. It's like I never know where to. That's really all I know.
The thing that I find with, I love that you know like your top thing. That's actually good. Mm-hmm. But the problem with, I'm sure you guys, as you've been working on building this platform, you're learning a lot about what marketing is like, probably things that you never even knew, mm-hmm. even if you had to market your own business. And one of the cardinal rules of marketing is if you're trying to talk to everyone, you're actually not talking to anybody. Mm-hmm. So what I try to do with folks is get them to decide some targets, some key attributes of their dream job. And City, I don't know if it'll help you or not, but I will send Demetria a worksheet that I use with some of my people and see if it can help you out just a little bit as you're doing your search. Yes. And if you don't like, you know how to find me. Like,
yeah, and I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna use it too.
Y'all know how to find me.
I was already kind of looking at your site, like, let me see if I can afford it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah. But what I was gonna say is that when I work with people, they get so, it's almost like fear stops them from being able to say what they want. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. I've had a couple of people, the easiest scenario is if you can narrow it down to one lane. Like if you say, I want to do what's one of the types of things you've applied for? Let's run with it. Just an example.
I would say more so like some type of like customer support.
Okay. So let's say you decided you wanted to do a remote customer support job and you were interested in doing like insurance or financial services because you have background on that. Let's pretend that's what it is. A lot of times people are afraid to say that out loud because they think if they do that, they narrow down and they are reducing their number of opportunities. Mm-hmm. That's not actually how it works though. So if you narrow it down to that, then you can make your LinkedIn and your resume and your conversations be about why you would be amazing for that. But if you say, I just want a remote job, well, why should it? No one ever posts a job for anything. Now, if there's two things you're interested in, you might build two different baseline resumes. So if you said, oh, well, I could do like either a project coordinator job or I could do a customer service job. You might have one resume geared towards project management and one resume geared towards customer service, and then you just pick. Mm-hmm. So you go search on Indeed, pick those things, and then go forward. But you want to have your mouth, your online presence, and your paperwork, meaning your resume, talk to whatever it is that you're going to apply for as best you can. So if you have two things that you're interested in doing, the clients that I work with, they usually have a favorite. So they will say, oh, I really love, you know, I've got this customer service and I've got this project coordinator I'm chasing. I love customer service more. And so they would make their LinkedIn a little bit more like that. And then they would have two resumes. So that's usually how they do it. And
but when you have, I'm sorry, if you have, let me see, would you advise or think it would work? Because for me, it's like, with that being said, I don't necessarily even know what it is that I want. However, I can probably pinpoint more of what I want just in the employer itself rather than like the job position.
That's fair. So if you look at it from that perspective, then what I would do is think about your superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you have a list of 10 companies that you would want to learn more about. If you can think about let's say your superpowers are, I'm excellent at customer service. I can finish projects on time, and I build good relationships with clients. Like maybe those are some of your things. Then you would talk about yourself in that way. You would talk about that on like a LinkedIn profile or whatever other online things that you do. You would look at those target companies, and you would also be talking about, this is what I'm great at.
Mm-hmm.
To people, you don't do this with it. You don't just send it to like a random recruiter at a company and say, I'm good at customer service. What have you got? Or these are 3 things I'm great at. What jobs do you have? That's not how recruiters work. They're all overloaded because guess what? Who gets fired? Who gets let go first in a layoff? Training and development, marketing, and recruiting. Those are the areas that get laid off first. So recruiters right now are super, super busy. So if you look for friends that know people in your company, if you go to a user group related to the technology for your company, if you use any of your networking and relationship skills to get in and talk to anybody that worked at a place or has been there in the last 2 years and say, look, this is kind of some of what I'm good at. And I am really interested in Acme Corporation because I like the industry that they're in. I've heard that they're really nice to their employees and flexible, and that they make great products. And I just really think I'd like to work there. This is what I'm amazing at. What kind of roles do you think I should look for on the careers page at Acme?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there anyone at Acme that you could introduce me to so that I could learn more about it? That's kind of one of the approaches that you can use.
Okay.
And a lot of times people that feel bored or they lose attention and focus to do little small tasks like apply to 10 jobs a week online or whatever, a lot of times those people like talking to other people. So they're more inclined to say, oh, I'm going to go try to build a relationship. I'm going to go try to see, can I find 2 people that work at Acme that would have a 30-minute Zoom with me? Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
So,
yeah, I just,
but if you want to, please continue.
No, it's okay. It's just more so, I know for sure, like, hey, I want as much nonverbal or over the phone communication as possible, to be self-led, not have to have so many meetings a day, things like that. Like, I know specifically what I don't want, but where that, fits in a particular category, that's just kind of
one thing that I have found useful as well is if you can befriend people that are leaders, people that know, a lot of times people that are in HR can be a pain. But if any of them have ever worked in recruiting or L&D or talent development, a lot of times they know a lot about a lot of different roles. So let's say that Demetria knows somebody at Acme Corporation that she's worked in that person's worked in L&D or has worked in HR in the past. Maybe you could ask Demetria, can you introduce me to Joe? I'm going to talk to Joe. And then you say, here are some of the key things I'm looking for. Here are some things I'm good at. I'm not sure what job title to look for. I'm interested in hearing from you. if you have ideas on what I should look for, because I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Or companies that I should look for that operate that way, or things like that. So those are some ways that might be able to help you, Sid.
Okay. And then also, do you look at resumes? Do you help with resumes?
So I don't write resumes.
Mm-hmm.
I believe like my main target demographic is sort of mid-career knowledge workers. I work with a lot of people that have been in tech, especially people that are leaders in tech. And what I do is I will teach techniques. I actually have a digital course that is called Rock Your Resume. So it's like a
Okay.
soup to nuts 6-step. Like, it was an in-depth 3-hour workshop that I gave live, and I recorded it. People can get it. It's only $60. So it talks about how to build a resume from soup to nuts. And then I also do reviews. So if someone has a resume they built already, or if they sit in one of my workshops or buy my course and they do it, they can buy a resume review service. And what I do with that is I have them give me a target title, like, oh, you want to be a customer service rep and in the financial services industry. Great. And then I will look at their resume, mark it up with advice specific to them, and then I will do a video walkthrough. So it's not a coaching call, it's a recorded video that they can go back and look at over and over again as they do their resume nowadays. I do that for LinkedIn as well.
Okay. And do you help folks look for jobs, or you just give advice how to find a job?
I don't get deep into the looking, because that's something, that I've had people ask me about that. I just was talking to a fellow coach of mine earlier. I am a teach people to fish kind of person. So I'm all about, like, if you're in the middle of an interview cycle and you want, advice on what questions to ask, or does this seem right, I'm going to ask you powerful questions so that first you listen to yourself. Because a lot of times we pursue jobs, there's something in our gut that says they're not right. And then if I ask the right question, you realize, oh, this is not for me. Or maybe someone's ready to drop out because they don't have confidence, and I ask them the right question and they stay in, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But I'm a big believer in teaching methods that people can use later. So I have had people come back to me and say, oh yeah, you helped me get a job and 7 years ago. And I also just, I moved on from there and I just started a new job 2 months ago, and I used all the things I learned from you 7 years ago. That to me is success.
That's powerful.
Because I've taken somebody from feeling powerless into being able to do something.
Yeah.
The very first client that I ever worked with that ever paid me any money just told me that she got a promotion and a relocation package to become a manager at her federal agency that she works for. And I couldn't be more excited, because she was like a 1099 contractor making nothing and being treated very poorly whenever I first started working with her 9 or 10 years ago. And now she's like a manager in IT in a federal agency. So
yeah, because it's
pretty
discouraging.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, the job market it's discouraging, because you feel like you value your worth, but you're always getting positions. Even if you go for jobs, it's, you get these questions. Why are you applying for this? You're overqualified. Or why do you want to take a pay cut? You get all of these questions and you're like, why are you asking me that? Like, if I want to change positions, maybe because of security, why are you asking me why do I want to take a pay cut?
You know what I believe? Well, that's a crappy question. Number one, why do you know what I want, what I make? Because in a whole bunch of states, it's not legal to ask. You're thinking you know what it is because you look at my job title, but like, that should not enter the conversation. That's garbage. But one of the big things, like in this whole like take control, one of the differentiators between me and a lot of other career coaches, resume experts, etc., is that I have a very strong belief that what we want matters first. And most people approach their job search as trying to be what everybody else wants. Now, you got to play the game, right? If you know that you want to be a customer service rep in the financial services industry, figuring out that for yourself first is important. Instead of letting your mama tell you that you need to be a project manager, or your best friend tell you should go back to school or whatever. Like, pick your lane and go down it. Once you get there, you got to play the game a little bit. Like, you need to tell people the things that are going to make it clear why you're qualified for that job.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because going from my concept to my resume that I apply with and getting the interview, that's the hardest stage of it. Once most people get brought in for an interview, you've gone through an HR screen. The hiring manager probably looked at your resume before they even confirmed that they should schedule you for the next round of interviews. Everybody at that point is at least like 80% qualified.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, it's about matchmaking.
Yeah.
So it's about, what do you have to offer? What do I have to offer?
Mm-hmm.
I can walk, or you can end this. It takes both of us to decide if this is going to carry on. And so many people walk into an interview thinking, my job is to impress this person. That's not your job. Your job is to find out the information that will tell you whether you want to continue or not.
Okay.
So if someone asks questions that are offensive, that probably tells you you're never going to get treated nicer than when you're interviewing. It's like dating. You know, your boyfriend might leave if they might not leave wet towels on the floor when you're dating. They might when you're married, but if they're leaving wet towels on the floor when you're dating, they ain't going to stop when you get married.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing with job searches. So if you get asked questions where you're like, this is overly personal, this is offensive, this is not right, or you learn things from your questions that are like, man, they wrote remote on the job description, but now they're telling me it's got to be in the office 3 days a week. I'm out. Then be out. Like, be out whenever it's a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of my random thought. You can all kinds of good stuff. I like coaching two ladies though. This is fun.
Yeah, we're gonna pull up off. We're gonna pull up off note off of the thing. You've given us some informative information, which is awesome. To share with the audience as well.
Yeah, you're welcome to put any of that on there. So, and some of this is stuff. This is literally some of the questions that I ask whenever people do coaching calls. So, yeah. That's good. It takes some time, but the other thing is, it's slow. I'm talking to people that work in the staffing and HR, and particularly in the tech space, since that's where so many people are. And it's starting to feel a little better. Like, people are starting to see maybe it's not going to be quite as bad for Q3 and 4. I don't think it's going to be a picnic. It's not going to be like 2021 where everybody was getting hired with big raises in tech. I don't know what your industries are like, but
I did. I worked for a CSOC at a large company.
Yeah. So I think it's going to feel better. And the news is never going to tell you whenever hiring is good. They're going to tell you Acme Corporation laid off 5,000 people today. They're never going to tell you that 10 other companies were hiring in your community were hiring 10,000 people this year. Yeah, they're not going to do that.
Yeah, layoffs are awful. I've been through.
Layoffs are clickbaity. Everybody loves a good layoff so they can get all bent out of shape on social media. But there are good things happening. Every single person that I have on my client roster right now that has started searching is getting interviews.
Okay.
And some of them maybe not as many interviews as they would have got if they would have been in the market 2 years ago, but it's not dead. And in the Great Recession, 2008, it was kind of dead. In 2001, whenever I first got laid off, there was a lot of times it was kind of dead. So I have hope that it's going to get better. So.
Okay.
All right, so we have definitely met our time here.
I'm so sorry to like.
No, you're fine.
I get very chatty. Everybody asks good questions, and I'm going to answer them.
I'm the same way. So we are the same way. So that's no problem. But I do want just to make sure everybody knows how to either contact you, utilize your services, or if you have any special products or anything that you need to draw foot traffic to. This is your time to shine. So you can let everybody know how to reach you. You have your banner scrolling across the screen here.
Well, one place that you can go. So we talked several minutes here about resumes. And one thing I've got is actually a resume don'ts guide, like 6 things to not do with your resume. And if you go to dianateaches.com, you'll see the ability to opt into that. That'll put you on my email list too. Beyond that, probably the best thing to do if you wanted to get in my orbit is to either connect with me on LinkedIn or visit my website, dianaalt.com. I have a few different ways you can connect with me. Like my social handles are there, my email is there. If you're ready to book a call, you can, like an intro call for one of my larger coaching packages, that's there. Like there's all the things are there. So.
Okay, perfect. And then
Great.
I'm going to shut it out because we're at time, but can you give us one thing through the grieving process for those that are grieving because you lost your husband, then you lost your dad not long after? Can you give the audience advice, one thing on that may help them through the grieving process of losing someone?
So I'm gonna tell you a couple things. Number one, because I am a career coach, and that's a major part of what we discuss. Life is too short to work a shitty job. That's one thing to remember. So you might not have a sick husband, spouse, family member, anything like that, but life, no matter if everything seems perfect right now, life is too short to work a shitty job. So if you're in that situation, start making moves to get out of it. Could take you a week, could take you a year, could take you longer because you go back to school or something. But what you want matters. What you want for your career and your life matters. The other thing is, I say this often, all y'all need therapy. I am a very big proponent of therapy. It doesn't make you weak. It helps you process things. I wish I would have had a good therapist probably 20 years earlier in my life. I probably would have processed some of my childhood, and maybe some of my things in my life would have been different. But I think that you cannot underestimate the value of a therapist. And for people that are worried about affording it, if you have a job with benefits right now, most companies, especially decent sized ones, have an employee assistance plan that usually has free therapy. So you can take advantage of that if you're worried about affording it. I'm not using them now, but I was in a crunch period where I really needed a therapist. And the only way I could get someone, because there was so little availability, I decided to sign up for BetterHelp.
Yep, I did BetterHelp too.
And I did. It was not long-term the right solution for me, but it was very good for about 2 to 3 months. I used that. And then I went and found another therapist that was a better fit. But I mean, I think it was like $220 a month, and I could message the therapist whenever I want and meet with them once a week. That is a steal. So $220 is a lot of money for some people, but it is definitely better than making yourself sick. A lot of times we'll need mental health help and we don't get it for ourselves, and we end up making ourselves physically sick. And then, now you're paying your $1,500 medical deductible instead of paying for, some therapy sessions. So anyway, that's my 2 things.
Yeah, and BetterHelp also goes by income, so you can get it cheaper than that. It's a valuation.
Oh.
When you come on, they'll ask you for your financial income. So for those,
I was making some pretty good money whenever I was there. So it's good to know that they have that. You should get sponsored by them. Like
I should.
Like they would be a really interesting brand alignment for you because of what you're doing. So
yeah. And I've talked about looking into BetterHelp as well as a sponsor.
Yeah,
so
that's
good.
Get on
that. Yeah. So Diana, I want to thank you so much. You have given so much informative, especially in the job career world, to help other folks. So we're definitely going to chat with you after. and Sid, you and Sid can exchange send friend requests too.
Sure.
For the talk and chat off note as well. So I
Great.
want to thank you for tuning into Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast. And as you heard from Diane, she went through some grieving processes and going through work abuse and bullying. And work abuse is real. That is a form of abuse. Everyone thinks that sometimes it comes from the domestic piece of it, but sometimes it comes from the work piece of it. And that can wear and tear. And take it from me, because I was losing hair from work abuse.
Oh,
And yes, it is real. So we want to thank you for tuning into Unfiltered Unspoken, where we are going to continue to share life experience to help others going through similar situations. And I hope that Diane was able to give you a lot of informative information to help you through your journey. Diane, thank you for tuning in, and we will chat soon.